Welcome to the Businesstalk, a global podcast series that highlights distinguished faculty members and their impactful scholarly contributions. I'm Deepak, your host from India. It is a true privilege to welcome to Businesstalk one of Europe's most distinguished philosophers of science, Dr. Philippe Huneman, a thinker whose work bridges the abstract world of ideas with the concrete realities of our digital lives. Joining us today. Before I get started, I would like to introduce the guest for today's episode. Dr. Philippe Huneman is a French philosopher and research director at the Institute for the History and Philosophy of Science and Technology at National Center for Scientific Research, Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne University, one of Europe's most prestigious centers for the history and philosophy of science. Originally trained in mathematics before turning to philosophy, Dr. Huneman has spent 3 decades at the intersection of science, metaphysics, and society, authoring over 180 journal papers and 8 edited books. His intellectual range is remarkably wide, from the philosophy of evolutionary biology and Kantian theory of organism to the politics of prediction and the social consequences of digital technologies. He is an affiliated professor at the University of Toronto and a former visiting professor at the University of Chicago, and has received multiple excellence awards from the French National Center for Scientific Research. His most recent book, Profiling How Predictive Algorithms Shape Identity in the Social Fabric, published by Stanford University Press, offers a groundbreaking philosophical examination of how digital profiling systems are quietly reshaping who we are individually and collectively. It follows his widely acclaimed works Why? The Philosophy Behind the Question, published in 2023, and Death, Perspectives from the Philosophy of Biology, again published in 2023. Today we sit down with Dr. Philippe Huneman to dig into one of the most pressing questions of our digital age: who controls your identity? Drawing on his landmark book, Profiling How Predictive Algorithms Shape Identity in the Social Fabric. Dr. Huneman reveals how predictive systems transform each of us from free individuals into predictable subjects and what that means for democracy, privacy, and the very nature of truth. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Philippe Huneman to the conversation. Professor Philippe, it's a distinct privilege to welcome you to Business Talk. We are grateful to you for accepting our kind invitation.
Thanks to you, and I am honored by the invitation.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, you describe the digital profile as simultaneously banal and singular. We share our data daily through searches, commutes, purchases without a second thought. At what point does this ordinary act of data living become something philosophically significant?
Well, I think it starts to be philosophically significant when we realize that actually we leave lots of data. I mean, just GPS data that are registered, collected, as you said, purchase data. And social media data. And we don't really know how many data we leave, and we do not know who actually gathers those data. So that's one first question which one can wonder, but what does what do these data where do they go, and why they are collected, and what do they become? So that's the first question. And then well, actually, I'm a philosopher of science, though, so I'm much concerned with the questions of causation, explanation, prediction, and actually, what goes on with the data we leave is that they are used somehow to produce prediction. The most obvious example is recommendation algorithms. So all the videos you see on YouTube fuel an algorithm that propose new possible videos to you that are supposed to match your taste. So why is it interesting from the viewpoint of philosophy of science? Because here what you see is that predictions are made, and predictions are made on the basis of a huge load of data, even though actually no system really captures the causes of what will happen. So for centuries, knowledge proceeds by making predictions and making hypotheses. Making hypotheses on the basis of data, making predictions to confirm or to infirm the hypothesis. And those hypotheses were about, let's say, the causal working of the world, like gravitation, natural selection, to name a few basic theories. Um, and what's going on here is that there is no ongoing theory of me when I'm like watching videos on YouTube, but the system, even though there is no causal theory of my mind, produces prediction about what I will like. So that's one. There is a philosophical issue about producing predictions on the basis of a huge number of data. That raises also political issues from the viewpoint of political philosophy, because, as I said, those data, I'm not really controlling what they become. So, of course, one can make a distinction between, for example, if I post photographs on like Facebook or Instagram, that's deliberate. But most of the time, I mean, like the my Google search history, for example, I don't really know that it has consequences, and actually it has. So what's politically important from a like philosophical viewpoint is that I am the data I am living are are monitored and are handled and processed by entities which, like I'm talking about Google, for example, here, entities which are firms that have already an immense economical and financial power. So, and actually, if you think about Google, the power that Google acquired is massively due to like Google Analytics and how Google monitor everything that's going on on the internet. So there are two things here to sum up. First, I was interested in the fact that you have prediction based on numerous data, so which rely on statistics that processes the data, and statistics with no intent of building a causal theory of what's going on. Just statistics that are um, producing predictions, and we'll talk later about that a bit more, but those predictions actually are often reliable. And so it has to do with a turn in sciences that many sociologists of science have considered like one or two decades ago, and sometimes they call it a turn from hypothesis-driven to data-driven science. If you think of Newton, for example, he made hypotheses and then he looked for some data, and actually it was costly and hard to find data. So it's hypothesis-driven science. You make hypotheses about the causal workings of the world, and then you try to find data to confirm or infirm your hypothesis. Whereas what we have now, if you think about genomics, like the Genomic Research Center are producing tons of genomic data every day, and the question is what to do with those data. So data first, and then hypothesis when it's in science. So the point is that the ability to gather huge loads of data makes a difference to science. It also makes a difference to, let's say, the way populations can be governed. And so yeah, so that's my answer to the question.
Professor, the book covers a vast range of data types, traces, metadata, search histories, biometric signals. Which category of data do you find most underestimated by people in terms of how deeply it enables profiling and why?
Well, so I think, well, I use the term profiling first because, I mean, everybody knows what it is to fill in a profile when you sign into whatever website or platform. Uh, but a profile is also, if you think about like TV shows, you know, detective stories, it's say the profiler is the one who, based on the data, can predict who will be the killer and what will be his or her personality and where to find her. That's what a profiler is. So profile is intrinsically predictive. And now I think that profiles, as they are um, built in, especially in the internet economy, in the platforms, or but also when it comes to, let's say, all the data you like the geographical data, GPS data, for example, like electric cars and self-driven cars, they produce a lot of data. I mean, they instantaneously scan the surroundings and send images or movies, etc. But so the point here is that you can think of a profile as a point in a very large, like abstract space of the data. So, like simple data, if you think of the rise of statistics in the 19th century, statisticians, they would have like they would consider two or three dimensions. For example, like let's say the wealth of the people and where they live. So that's two dimension. And then you can make statistics. You can correlate, where you live in the countryside, you might have chances to be less wealthy than in some parts of the city, etc. But you have only two dimensions. Now, if you think of the data brokers that are gathering data in the internet, they might have like hundreds or thousand dimensions about everybody. So if each dimension, so in my example, like location and wealth were two dimension. If you think of current, so it's called big data systems, where you would have data about like wealth, location, purchase history, history of like dining in restaurants, GPS data points, etc. You have like hundreds of thousands of dimensions. So a profile is just the list of the data on all of these dimensions. So it's like a point in a hyperdimensional space. So now, when you see this, and back to your question, when people started to see that we have like tons of data, so they call it big data, they understood that what makes a difference, it's not only the volume of data, which is incredibly large compared to what happened like 50 years ago, but it's also other properties of those data. Sometimes they call it the four V's, so it's their variety and then velocity. And also their like value, like financial value. But I think variety is very important. So, and that's exactly what I was telling you. I mean, it's having lots of dimensions on which you consider the profiles, and so that's one thing. And velocity is just having data like in like live stream data, so to say. So that the data captures the transformations of the people and of the world. But so to answer your question, I think that the key thing is the variety of data. So maybe some are very important. Location data are very important because think of well, in France we have, and in many other countries we have a self like rental bike, that you can rent for a day, and it's a service provided by well, here in the city of Paris, but you have this elsewhere. But those data, I mean, if you look at the data, my bike user data tell where I live, where I work. I mean, where I live is like where at night I'm most often leaving the bike. Where I work is where on the morning I most often leave the bike. So you see, the data, so the location data are important, but they are very important where they're combined with other data. For example, data about my phone calls, like who I call, or because that allows someone to map the spatial grid onto the network of social relations. So variety of data is important. So there is maybe and once you consider the variety is important among all the kinds of data, I guess like the location data are important, and also all the data that actually can, when they are coupled to other kinds of data, tell you a lot. Like Facebook friends and location, for example. Or yeah.
Professor Foucault gave us the disciplinary society, Deleuze the society of control. You now introduce the profiling society. What is fundamentally new about this third stage? And what does it do that discipline and control could not?
Well, so actually, the central thesis of the book is that we are entering in what I call the profiling society. So I define what a profile is. Um, and so in the past, Michel Foucault is very famous for having uh, in Surveiller, Punir, like Control and Punish. It's a book from 77, I guess. He has introduced this idea of disciplinary society. And a disciplinary society is a discipline where the discipline as a technique to coerce and control people becomes pervasive. It's inherited from like the monks, the monasteries. And Foucault is showing that they are pervasive across schools, across army, across factories. They are all organized in the same way. So you have populations and they are made as producive as possible by being disciplined, each person doing a specific thing, which means which has two consequences. The first one is that the key questions for those society, the key problem is to have norms enforced. So that's why there is surveillance. Surveillance is about checking whether someone, for example, at school does her homework, is present or absent, and when the norm is transgressed, then there is punishment. So there is a solidarity between discipline and punishment, and ultimately it has to do with the first stages of industrial capitalism, where the key question, the key objective is maximizing productivity of a collective. And they and later on, Gilles Deleuze, in a very short paper, and he doesn't really work a lot about it, but it has been influential in later literature, said we are not anymore in the disciplinary society for the reason that in the 60s, especially in France or in Europe, the individual came to the foreground. So the people want to live their individual life, etc. So whereas in the disciplinary society, there is think of like factories in the 19th century, the great homogeneity. In a control society, people are different, but they are monitored. And for example, they are monitored just by the list of let's say the list of purchases they are making with their credit card. So, but what's new, I think, and that's why it's in the title of the book, there are two new things. The first one is prediction. So in the disciplinary society, the problem is to enforce the norm. So a worker has to deliver. A pupil at school has to work and pass the exams. Whereas in the predicting profiling society, the key problem is about predicting, meaning not who is where, that is surveillance, but who will be doing what. And so, for example, recommendation algorithms are about what you will like, not what you are currently liking, as videos. And so that's fundamentally new. And I'm saying that based on algorithms, which means the profiles work basically by matching my profiles as a set of data points with many similar profiles with lots of, and so, which means that if I am a cloud of people who like such and such and such, I will be liking this other movie that people who have a similar profile were liking. And that can be algorithmically processed just because the amount of statistics to do are just beyond human control. And so we have the tool to do it, which also, to conclude, which makes my question about my thesis about profiling societies along the same lines as what Foucault was doing. Foucault was questioning something like, what kind of society is produced by the technologies of discipline that arose in the 19th century. And my question is, what kind of society is, let's say, made possible by algorithmic technologies that we have all over the place now? And so it's the connection between techniques that are existing and governmentality of population.
Professor, you frame the individual as both an unwilling producer and unwitting subject of their own digital profile. How do these two roles interact? And is there a meaningful difference between being surveilled without consent versus being manipulated without awareness?
Yeah, so that's exactly one of the key questions. So I think prima facie, it's very different. So the first one, being surveyed without consent, is about the present, like where I am, what I'm doing. And the second aspect is about the future. Manipulating is about what I will be doing. And when I have a set of examples that are quite well known, and when it comes to manipulation, and maybe the most well known is the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where the intelligence firm Cambridge Analytica leaked millions of profiles from Facebook, and then on this basis could like profile like hundreds of thousands of people and nudge them by exposing them to especially fake Facebook profiles, so that they would in the end vote for Brexit because they were predicted to vote for Brexit in the case they would be exposed to specific claims, specific life histories of people on Facebook. Like it was what we call it astroturfing, so it was fake profiles, but they were designed to nudge those people who have been profiled so that it was predictable what they would do if they were faced to those profiles. So that's where it comes to manipulation. And of course, people were not aware because they were on Facebook looking at profiles, looking at other Facebook accounts and believing they were true, authentic Facebook accounts. So that the point is that there are two senses in the word profiling, and that's what I'm using the word. One of the sense, as I was telling, is like the profiler detective, so predicting how what someone will do. And the second meaning is very akin to the word profiling is aeronautics. So for example, you are profiling a piece of a plane's wing so that it will be more aerodynamic. So you are shaping something. So, and in this case, in the Cambridge Analytica case, you are shaping the votes of people, whereas they are not aware of that. So it's a very specific kind of manipulation, and and I'm interested in the fact that the profiles are doing both things. They are both predicting what people are doing, and that's recommendation algorithms, and they are like nudging people to do such and such things. And and the difference is that when I am recommended something by like I don't know like Netflix, it's written you will like, so I'm aware of the recommendation. Whereas when I'm one of those people who is voting for Brexit because I have been massively exposed to fake Facebook accounts, I'm not aware of the fact that I am nudged toward that. So there's two things, like being nudged in a completely unaware way and being recommended something which is a kind of prediction are different, but they are very close actually. And sometimes if you consider just the fact that you are on Facebook or on YouTube and some videos are presented to you, or like any kind of social media, like Instagram, there is this post and then this other one. It's not a recommendation. It's not written, you like this, but it's completely algorithm driven on the basis of your profile and the similar profiles that have been spotted by the algorithm.
Professor, one of the most striking ideas in the book is the impact of profiling on individual memory. Can you walk us through how algorithm curated world, one that constantly optimize what we see and recall, actually reshapes the way we remember our own lives.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that interested me and that is still interesting me is the way those technologies impact like our lives, our persons. And so here, same example, which is the YouTube algorithm. So we are watching videos on YouTube. So there is like the watch history. So there is a memory of what you are watching, but this memory fuels an algorithm that presents to you other videos, and actually after some time you didn't really choose the new videos. They are provided by the algorithm on the basis of what you are watching. So the algorithm is external to you, but it's you who who watch the video. So there are really tragic cases of that. There has been a complaint issued by a family because their son has been watching videos on YouTube. Maybe you've heard of that, and the algorithm suggested to this son suggested more and more violent and ISIS related videos, and finally he went to Syria to join the jihad, and he was killed in Syria. And the question is, yeah, without the YouTube algorithm, it's very probable that he would never have seen those videos, and he would never have gone to Syria. So you see, it really impacts our lives. Most of the time, it's not so tragic. But to take another example, think of you have an when you have an iPhone or a smartphone in general, there is a default feature that you open the photo application and it shows you photos, let's say photos from 1 year ago, or you didn't ask anything. So it shows photos of your past, not all the photos. It's like, I don't know, of course, we don't know the algorithm, but so it selects photos from the past and it shows those photos to you. And actually, after a few months, you have seen those photos a lot and a lot more than other photos, but you didn't make the choice actually. So, what will be surfacing from your memories will be shaped by the algorithm proper to the photo app of the iPhone, which is of course very extrinsic to you. And it contributes to shaping your own memory.
Professing right that there is no optimal existence, only optimal profits. Recommendation systems are designed to give us our best experience, but you argue this actually improvises us. How does algorithmic organizations and optimizations robust of the productive failures and surprises that define a fully lived life?
Yeah, so that's actually when I was writing the book, I realized that this profiling operation that is at the core of the algorithmic predictive system goes with two other processes. The first one is evaluation, which is like, I mean, we are on social media, people are like evaluating other people or other photographs all the time, like or the etc. Um, and optimization, and like lots of the ads that you find are always about optimization, like optimize your production with this novel AI tool. Um, or dating apps are about finding the best mate for you. So the optimization is the narrative that supports the way all those algorithmic predictive systems are distributed and are circulating and become pervasive. And so if you think about, for example, recommendation for restaurants or hotels, I, the idea of TripAdvisor or is that you'll find the best restaurant because you have all those evaluations, and it will be optimized because it's somehow objective. So there is the rationale of that is that suppose I ask my friend what's a good restaurant, that's the tastes of my friend, but people are led to think that TripAdvisor, for example, because it collects evaluation by lots of people, it will be more objective. So that will be really the best restaurant. And so I think the optimization story drives the way we are led to all those platforms and systems. Um, and the thing is that uh, from the viewpoint of well, a moral philosopher, even though I'm not a moral philosopher by profession, but there is something problematic here, which is that um, I remember in the book I tell a story about like going to the movies with my son, and we go to see Jurassic Park #5, and he was like 15, and really he hated it. And he was like, why did you take us to see this movie, etc. And I tried to explain to him that part of experience in life is that sometimes you try something and you don't like it, and that's about just growing up and just living your own life, and it's so it seems to me that this idea that given all the technologies we have now, and think of AI, it's the same thing, but like one step further. With all those technologies, you will be presented to the best made, the best restaurant, and in self-help applications, you'll find the best version of yourself, and I think that's missing something that is really essential to human experiences, that sometimes uh, the reality doesn't meet your expectations. And now I have another example which goes in this way. There is, as you have heard about it, there is a wave of companion AIs. So lots of people, and every month you can read a paper about this in the Guardian or the New York Times. People have like chatbots like Replica or now ChatGPT, and they have like very close relation to the chatbot, and finally they sometimes they have a they give their own chatbot a first name, and they have love stories with the chatbot, or there are very strong friendship stories. Okay, and the thing is that, as one of those replica user was saying to a journalist, I quoted in my book, the AI companion is never it is never tired. It is never really oppositional. It is never criticizing you. It never gets annoyed. So I mean that indeed that's optimal, but that's not real life. I mean, if you want to have a deep relationship with real people, at some point they will disappoint you. You'll have to negotiate something, or they will just you'll have to confront them, and so I think those and the companion AI case is really telling, because it shows how much those let's say those systems are depriving us from this key dimension of human experience, which is the negativity, the failure, the disappointment, etc. And kids, when they grew up, they in general, teenager or kids, they learn to do with that, to cope with this. But if this dimension of the experience is just withdrawn from us, I think that might be a problem, especially because even though those systems exist, they will never avoid the negative experience. So you have to have learned it. You have to experience it through your education and your growing up. Yeah, yeah.
Professor, if an algorithm continuously predict your behavior and those predictions shape the choices you are offered, at what point does your identity stop being something you author and start being something the algorithm co-writes for you?
Well, but I think that questions flows from what we were just saying, and that it's very hard to find a boundary, because um, things are really much entangled. When suppose that I am led to like I'm listening, as many people, songs on Spotify, and Spotify has this feature that it recommends you stuff that you've never thought about it, and sometimes it's very good. So is it me or is it the algorithm? It's very hard to tell, and I take this opportunity to clarify one point. Actually, I my book, I mean, as people, well, like Foucault, even though I'm not comparing myself to Foucault, but it's my book is mostly analytic. I mean, I'm not criticizing in the negative way, saying that's horrible, etc. That's really not the point. Um, so I'm trying to understand what's going on, and uh, and so there is no, so for example, if you think of Spotify, there is something that has been christened the long tail effect by journalist David Carr, which is the idea that actually there are many, if well, back in the times when I wanted to buy a record, I would go to the local shop, and in the local shop there are many records or rock bands that they just don't sell. They don't have them because you need to store everything, etc. Whereas if you listen to music on Spotify or on another kind of platform, they can store everything. So at some point you might be exposed to songs that you would never have found anywhere in a shop, which is also a good thing for the musicians because it increases their chances to be actually listened to and praised. Um, so there are and there are some philosophers who think of the recommendation algorithm as somehow an empowering tool, just because they are likely to suggest you things that without the let's say the internet you wouldn't have encountered. So I'm not saying it's completely negative at all, but there is there is this really you can think about all those indie rock bands that would never have been known without Spotify, which is a good thing. And you can also think, like on the negative side, you can also think of um, recently there were people who, and still I'm going to tragedy now, but recently we heard cases of people using their conversation with the companion AI, and finally they were driven into like really horrible things like murders or mass murders just because the AI companion was sort of I think there is in the literature there is a yeah they were caught in a kind of negative, well, positive feedback loop, positive in the scientific sense, which means it's reinforcing, and with no way to be, because those companions, they are in general, they are, we call it psychophancy. They go in your sense, whatever your sense, in your direction. They are always supportive. There is a, those systems can like allow people to discover new things, and I think that's quite empowering. Or they can just they can lock some people into fantasies that become more and more deleterious for them and for other people around them.
Professor, the third section of your book enters metaphysical territory. You argue that profiling creates a feedback loop where the algorithmic model of a person begins to shape the actual person. Can you give us a concrete example of a how profile stops describing reality and start producing it?
Yeah. So I think the well, in this third section, which is about metaphysics, so which is about to say it with like big words, which is about how those predictive algorithms change reality, what we collectively call, what it means to be real, and what you collectively call reality. And one of the category that emerges when I try to think about this is as in your question, is the category of the loop. There are lots of loops between contents in the world of profiles and, what one would naively call reality. So I'll give you an example. So the one of the example is about interior designing. So it's many apartments or houses, mansions are offered to be rented on platforms like Airbnb, which is the dominant one. Okay. Um, so we get used to a specific kind of interior design. And actually, if you, very often you can rent an Airbnb in France, in Portugal, and in the US or and they'll be very similar. I mean, the interior of the uh, because I think that the more people see photos on Airbnb ads, the more they make their own interior, the flat they will be renting on Airbnb, similar to those pictures they see. So nobody really imposed a kind of aesthetics. Actually, that's really the same things with coffee shops. I mean, it's really striking. Coffee shops, they are the same all over the world. They have the same way of writing the words espresso, latte, double espresso on the wall with the same font. There is the same like wooden tables, brick, like apparent brick walls, and so there is an aesthetic of coffee shops that has because people see them on Instagram all the time. So when you open a coffee shop, I mean, you do what you see on Instagram. So things that are and what you see on Instagram is fueled by the Instagram algorithm. So here you see how like designing of coffee shops or designing of apartments become um, become similar to what is on Instagram or on Airbnb. So there is a loop between the reality, the photos of the reality on that are put on websites, and then the new realities that are people designing their apartment or opening their coffee shop somewhere in the world. And that's completely innocuous. But what is interesting here is that there is another layer now, which is that most of the ads, well, very often the ads, and many of them now, they are generated by like Midjourney or DALL-E, an generative artificial intelligence image producer system. And so they show you like apartments that don't exist or restaurants that don't exist, but you see many of them all the time, and they are photographs, but the photographs are generated on the basis of existing generated on Instagram or Airbnb. So it's like it's creating another layer of images that will shape the reality. And so there is the loop between not only between reality photos and Instagram reality, but reality photos and Instagram, mid-journey generated photos on Instagram or Airbnb, and the reality, etc. So that's how those loops are shaping reality. And now actually that goes the same way with persons. So could be a loop with. So what's striking with especially with the internet, is that a bit like my example of the long tail and the rock bands that becomes to be known because there is Spotify. Um, it has been has been shown that lots of communities actually are existing just because of the internet. So and it's very simple. I mean, there is a you can think of um, extreme sports, or well, there's something that is very a bit let's say striking or strange, which is the other kins. So other kins are people who think they are deep down in themselves animals, like a kangaroo or a bat. So there are people like you and me, but they think that they are truly a bat. And there are communities of other kins, and there are forums, and they talk about. So, uh, but actually, those people get to know each other through the profiles, through the algorithm that would, if you start talking about the fact that you slightly feel like uh, a kangaroo, you might be suggested a video of someone who says the same thing, or etc. And so it starts it starts building a community of those other kins. I mean, it's really very strange. I mean, I looked into it and they exist. Well, in real life, someone who believes that she deep down, she's a kangaroo in Italia, and someone who has the same, well, very few people are like this, first. And second, someone who has the same feeling in Kenya, for example, they would never meet. So they would never think that this is something that exists and that might be frequent. So you see how the profiles put people in relation to with each other, and actually from the moment you enter a kind of forum of other kins or a WhatsApp group or a Instagram group of other people who think themselves as other kins, the other kin your other kin personality starts to develop. It would have not developed without all that. So it's a concrete example of how my profile on Instagram um, start producing me as here in my example another kin. So those are a bit like fringe examples. Those are not very frequent, even though they exist. But actually, they are the process of through the process through which someone is shaped, like and also in her personality is shaped through those like Instagram posts, conversations, WhatsApp with people presented to her through the algorithm. Those cases are not rare actually, and it's part of this loop between the people, the profiles, the data left by people, the profiles built on those data, and then what is presented to those people through the websites, the social media, etc.
Professor, the book shows that profiling has profound implications for politics, not just consumer behavior. How exactly do predictive algorithms threaten democratic deliberation? And is there a scenario where they could be used to strengthen rather than undermine political participation?
Well, first, indeed, the one of the effect of predictive algorithm is that the effect on the community are very varied and they can go in various ways. But I think so. If you think about political activism, for example, well, it has been shown that people often, when they are on social media, they are caught in what they call information bubbles, for example, where they are through because of the algorithm, they believe something and they are shown similar kind of content all the time, and finally they just uh, lose sight of, let's say, the other part of the world, a world where people believe different things. So it has an effect of, and that has been discussed a lot, it has an effect of fragmenting social reality, polarizing opinions. Okay. And this polarizing, indeed, as we were discussing just before, has the effect of making people, for example, someone can be an activist because she has been through the algorithm in contact with many activists and with many and actually as we were saying, is it her like on her will, like deliberately, is it something she's been dragged into? It's very hard to answer, but this means that predictive algorithms have uh, an impact on politics. So that one can distinguish two kinds of impacts. The first one is um, the one with which many people are concerned now in democracies, is the fact that public opinions can be indeed nudged, as in the case of Brexit, nudge towards such and such opinion that might be opinions that are controlled by other countries, for example, and we have lots of examples of countries like South Korea or Iran or others having agencies trying to indeed do this nudging in actually in democracies when there are elections. Um, and it also benefits in general extremist parties in especially in France, but also in the US. Um, in the UK, we are seeing this now, unfortunately, very much. Fake news about the migrants and then real aggression against migrants, etc. Um, but there is another scenario, as in your question, where actually the democratic orientation can be sustained. I think one first has to remember that the internet was initially set as a space of democracy. It started in the 80s. There was this Declaration of Independence of the cyberspace written by John Barrow, I think the lead singer of the Grateful Dead, and other people were really so it was the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the organization that did this, and they wanted to preserve internet as a space where people could express themselves completely without censorship, without restraints, and so now, when we think of the internet, there is an oligopoly like Google who is controlling whatever goes through the internet because of its search engine and its analytics. OpenAI, so Microsoft through OpenAI, which is controlling everything that goes through, or lots of things that goes through generative artificial intelligence, and Meta with Facebook. So there is an oligopoly on that has its hand on everything that goes into every content in the internet, and that's of course a problem. So I think that there is a scenario in which, let's say, this democratic internet um, wins. And so, and I guess it has to do with the possibility of having alternative platforms like, um, yeah, for example, on the internet in France, you have several journals that are free, so that are independent. And so you can see the internet as the place where some people create new journals. And well, actually in France, as in many other countries, many journals and the television are controlled by billionaires. I mean, they bought and they have an agenda, a political agenda. So they use those media or TVs or like journals to, let's say, nudge population towards one specific opinion. So here, the internet is still a place where new journals can have investigative journalism delivered and exert some kind of critical thinking. So that's one thing. And maybe one can start with that to think of this profiling system as not only not only the let's say the field of exercise of the oligopoly, Meta, Google, etc., but also a place where some free journalism and free discussion can still happen. Yeah. So and some people are doing this. You know, if you think of like, for example, the open software or open platforms movement now that exists till the beginnings of the internet. Yeah.
Professor Philip, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. You approach this subject without ideological bias, which is refreshing. Given everything the book reveals about how profiling systems evaluate, optimize, and predict us, what do you think is the most intellectually honest response? Is resistance possible? Is regulation sufficient? Or do we need a fundamentally new social philosophy for the algorithmic age?
Well, I guess that's the key question actually. The question that people, whether they are like academic philosopher like me or any kind of academic or journalist or whatever has to consider. So regulation is very important. I mean, it's that's why, for example, in Europe, the LGPD, which is the regulation that constrain websites to disclose the cookies they have, and that's really something. I mean, that's very important. Um, and but that's not sufficient. For example, if you think of this RGPD, first of all, it's like it's in Europe, it's very much localized, you know, like in the US that doesn't exist. Second, it can be bypassed very easily. So, for example, all the when you open a website here in France, you have a window that opens up and that says, "Do you consent to all the cookies and the that are monitoring what you are doing on the web or not?" But you can click or consent, and it's really a big button in blue that is very salient. And if you want to do continue without accepting to those cookies, etc., it's something. I mean, it's really written in small font, and you really have to look for this instruction to be able to click for it. So it's a case of nudge. So the space of possibility is oriented. You are free to choice, but the space of choices is oriented toward one specific choice, and most of the time you'll make it. So regulation is important. It's not enough. Something that seems also, I think, very important. I mean, actually, it's about the economy. It's about considering what is common. And I know that certain individuals saying it's a political question. So, for example, who owns the codes for the algorithm? Like the code for the Instagram or Twitter or any kind of big social media algorithm, it's really crucial because it affects the lives of people. And often I'm saying, like the pollution, it's about the air you breathe. So it affects lots of people. So the air has to be controlled. And the air is a common. It has to be common. It doesn't have to be something that someone can possess. And I think that the algorithms that run in like all the most used social media or platforms, those algorithms uh, should be considered as common, which is really a crucial political issue. Now, if you think of OpenAI, for example, OpenAI was running with an open code before ChatGPT, somewhere people could look at the code. And then when OpenAI released publicly ChatGPT and then entered into this competition with Meta and Google, I mean, their code is no longer open. DeepSeek has an open code for the moment, but the other one, and nobody knows exactly how it works, which is a problem actually, because uh, the citizens are completely deprived of any visibility on systems, processes, machines that are really ruling their lives somehow. So yeah, so I think the commonalization of uh, algorithmic cause or access to data, etc. That's a key political priority. Yeah.
Listeners, it's a rare that a conversation leaves you wanting to rethink something as fundamental as your own identity, but today's discussion has done exactly that. Professor Philippe Huneman, thank you for bringing such clarity, depth, and intellectual courage to Business Talk. Your book Profiling is essential reading for anyone trying to make sense of the world we now live in. We hope to have you back soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your attention and your interest and this conversation. That was great. Thank you a lot.